the college football playoff format was not built for this era of college football. Plain and simple. A lot of people had a lot of things to say when the final bracket was unveiled. Now, a lot of people were saying a lot of these things in these projected bracket reveals that we had certainly been seeing in the weeks leading up to Selection Sunday. But now that we see it, now that we know exactly where certain teams are going, now it hits a little bit different, doesn't it? And I said this last night when we kind of started to really find out where some of these teams were projected to go, where things were really starting to slide in. That this was a bracket, this was a playoff format that was built when Texas was still in the Big 12, when Oregon was still in the Pac-12, heck, when the Pac-12 still existed. Okay, remember, this was originally a 6+6 format. And now they flipped it over to 5+7. And when we had those Power 5 conferences, okay, you had certainly some big teams in the Big Ten. You certainly had some big teams in the SEC, like of course we do now. But you also had some significant programs in the Pac-12. You had some significant programs certainly in the Big 12. And maybe the distribution of power was distributed a little bit more across college football. But now that we look at it, now that we really have our eyes on this and what exactly it's looking like in the current model of college football, this is not a playoff that was built for the Power 2 era. This was a playoff format that was built for the Power 5 era. Now, there might be some of you out there saying, wait a minute, Ted, it's the Power 4, it's not the Power 4. It's not the Power 4. Look, I love watching Big 12 football, the chaos, the craziness that is Big 12 football, but there is a clear and obvious divide between the Big 10 and the SEC up here. This is what happens when you have consolidated the power players in the Big 10 and the SEC, okay, when you have moved those programs up to those two conferences and you have clearly separated them up there, and then you have the Big 12 and then you have the ACC. When you have the guaranteed top 4 conference champions getting those byes, this is the type of situation that you're going to get. Where you have a Boise State and an Arizona State, all love to Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils. Cam Scatterbo is a great player. Ashton Genty is a great player, of course, there for Boise State. But in a 12-team format, it is very clear and it is very obvious that the first-round byes should go to the top 4 teams right now in college football. But it certainly doesn't stand that way. And the way that these matchups really end up being displayed, it kind of gives rewards to maybe teams that shouldn't have certain rewards. We'll get into that certainly a little bit later. So where does this all lead to? It leads to 2026 is where it all leads to. Now, maybe I'm not sure if they can make any sort of these changes, these significant of changes for the 2025 season, but it leads us to 2026 when the college football playoff format can be changed. I think it's clear we could see a 14-team playoff with the top 2 teams, which would be the byes as the Big Ten champion and the SEC champion. You could word it as the top 2 conference champions get byes in that specific format in 2026. The 4-4-2-2-1-1 has been thrown out there as well with a guaranteed number of spots for each conference, and that's certainly something that could be very interesting because that specific format kind of takes away the committee a little bit, and you have maybe conference play-in games to create more revenue from the conference level. We all know this is financially based, but that is something that could also be thrown out there as well. Whatever it is, it's going to change. It's going to change in 2026. That is kind of one of the after effects and one of the aftershocks of seeing a Boise State as the number 3 seed in the college football playoff. But this is what we have, and this is kind of what we're dealing with right now. Let's talk Big Ten. Let's talk some matchups in this great college football playoff. Let's talk first about the game that's going to be before anybody else. It is the very first game of the college football playoff. It's going to go down Friday, December 20th, when the number 10 seed Indiana Hoosiers travel. They go on the road to take on the 7 seed Notre Dame Fighting Irish for the Indiana State Championship. Both of these teams hung 60 plus on the other power team in the state of Indiana, that being the Purdue Boilermakers, which they were not a good team. But anyway, here we are battling for the state championship of the state of Indiana. You know, when I really start first to break down this matchup between the Hoosiers and the Fighting Irish right now, I think Notre Dame presents a little bit of a difficult matchup for Indiana. When you looked at Indiana and you saw how they played against Michigan, when you saw how they played against Ohio State, when you saw teams that were built really well to great in the trenches, that's where Indiana maybe showed their first couple of bumps in the road as a football team this season. Look at what that Michigan defensive line did against Indiana's offense, right? They held them to just 20 points in that game. The Hoosiers won 20-15 over Michigan. And then, of course, you have that Ohio State game where the Buckeyes just kept on coming. They just kept on coming, and they just kept on coming, man. Curtis Rourke and this offense was completely out of rhythm because they just couldn't protect. Notre Dame has a pretty good defensive line, but I think they're better in the trenches on the other side of the ball. This is one of the best rushing attacks in all of college football. They've got a great run blocking offensive line. You look at Jeremiah Love, you look at Jadarian Price, of course, Riley Leonard gets involved in the run game as well. This is good. Now, I know Indiana. Statistically, Indiana looks pretty good against the run, but I think that this is going to be a big challenge for the Hoosiers in this game. I think both of these teams kind of want to play a little bit differently. I think Notre Dame, of course, what do they want to do? They want to be physical. They want to run the ball. They want to control the line of scrimmage, and it really fits. I mean, it fits in well, certainly, to what they already are, but it fits in well to game planning against Indiana. That's why I said that this is a little bit of a difficult matchup. Going on the road to South Bend, Indiana certainly takes it up another notch as well. But when I look at this thing from Indiana's standpoint, when I look at it from a Hoosier perspective, we need to try to replicate what USC was able to replicate in bits and pieces of that last regular season game between the Fighting Irish and the Trojans. Jade Maeva threw for 360 yards against this Notre Dame secondary. Now, Notre Dame, statistically, a lot of this season, they've been pretty good against the pass, but USC was able to find, they were able to keep on coming back, and if it weren't for a couple of late turnovers, USC was going toe-to-toe with Notre Dame late in that game. They were coming back, and they were making this a really competitive ball game. We know what Indiana wants to do, right? We know what Curtis Rourke and company are really comfortable with, right? They want to open it up. I think that they want to create explosive plays against Notre Dame, make the Irish kind of score and try to play that back and forth kind of game. Hey, I said that about Penn State playing against Oregon, and Penn State was able to do it. I think Notre Dame, and you look at what Notre Dame was able to do scoring-wise in that game against the USC Trojans. So I think Notre Dame can score, but you get into if Indiana gets into a slugfest against a team like Notre Dame, that's not going to go well for Indiana. So they got to find a way to get the ball out on the perimeter. They got to find a way to create some explosive plays down the field so Curtis Rourke and this offense can be playing at their best. But I think it's going to be tough. I think Notre Dame, just in a lot of different ways, presents a difficult matchup right now for the Indiana Hoosiers. Let's go on and talk about the next first round game, that being the number 11 seed, the SMU Mustangs, the old ponies, the ACC runner-ups. They are going to Happy Valley to take on the 6th-ranked Nittany Lions of Penn State. Man, you get to this situation, you get to the playoff, you get a home game. Penn State gets a home game. Everybody in Happy Valley is like, all right, yeah, we wanted to win the Big Ten championship game. No doubt. They wanted to have that first round bye. They wanted to be playing in the Rose Bowl game. But you get a playoff game, home game. That's great. And it gets stuck at noon. Man, a great potential for maybe a whiteout nighttime type of atmosphere. Heck, Maybe they'd even throw them in the mid-afternoon. Nope. You know, when Fox is not involved, they find a way to still be involved, right? With this old big noon kickoff for the Penn State Nittany Lions. But you know, it was a great atmosphere at noon earlier this season against the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's going to be a great atmosphere for this playoff game against the SMU Mustangs. I have absolutely no doubt about that. What I said when of the Big Ten Championship reaction that I had here, Penn State needs to play, maybe not defensively, right? But that's a really good Oregon offense. They're going to put up a lot of yards and a lot of points on anybody they play. But when I look at offensively for Penn State in that Big Ten Championship game, you need to find a way to keep on playing like that. Your offensive line needs to find a way to keep on playing like that. Your run game needs to find a way to keep on playing like that. Drew Aller, Tyler Warren, Harrison Wallace, you go down the list. They need to keep on finding ways to continue to play like that. If this is what we can expect offensively from the Penn State Nittany Lions, this is a team that can make an extremely deep run, ladies and gentlemen, here in the college football playoff. So we know about Penn State here in Big Ten country. What about those Mustangs? This is a balanced but explosive offense over there in the ACC. Quarterback Kevin Jennings, over 3,000 yards, 22 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. The season really started with Preston Stone, but he certainly has come in and he certainly played well. Brashard Smith is a really good running back as well for the Mustangs. I talk about balance, right? This is a team that throws the football 30, 35 times a game, but they also run the football, and they run the football really well right now. As I mentioned with Brashard Smith, over 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns this season. I think they lean a little bit more into the pass game than they do the run game, but as you can tell from those statistics, they can still run the football fairly effectively. There is a large drop-off after Brashard Smith, so also keep that in mind as well. So here's another thing to keep in mind that when I was really starting to look, when I was really starting to research things right now, this is an SMU offensive line that's been pretty good in pass protection so far this season, right? They've only allowed 15 sacks. 15 sacks, and we know all about that Penn State pass rush. We know all about that Penn State defensive line, and you know that they're going to want to wreak havoc. They're going to want to get SMU into bad situations behind the sticks. Then those are great situations for Penn State to be able to pin their rear back, and go after the passer. SMU, solid defense, 28th in the country in scoring defense. Like, you can throw all of these things out there about the Southern Methodist University Mustangs. But I look up and down SMU's schedule, and then I look at Penn State. SMU has not played a team like Penn State. They have not played a team with the size, with the speed, with the athleticism. They have not played a Big Ten team, an elite, a very good type of Big Ten football team like the Penn State Nittany Lions. But Penn State, they've seen teams like SMU. They've seen teams better than SMU. Look at the Oregon Ducks in what they were able to do in that specific football game. Penn State has been competitive in every single game this season. With that home crowd behind them, I think that this is a difficult spot for the Mustangs coming into this situation, coming off of that last-second field goal loss to the Clemson Tigers. I think Penn State, I'm not a moral victory guy. I hate the concept of a moral victory. You play to win the game, as Herm Edwards said all those years ago. But when I look at that Penn State performance against the Oregon Ducks, the top team, the national championship favorite, not according to Vegas for some godforsaken reason, but in my opinion, the team that I think is best suited to win the national championship in the Oregon Ducks, the way that Penn State played against them and the matchups against SMU, I think Penn State certainly, of course, has an advantage in that particular football game. All right, let's go to the last first-round game that a Big Ten team will be playing in. It is the 8-9 game, and it features the Tennessee Volunteers. They're the 9 seed. They go on the road to face off against the number 8 seed, that being the Ohio State Buckeyes this Saturday, December 21st kickoff. You can break down players, you can break down schemes, you can break down advantages, you can break down disadvantages. But when I look at this specific matchup, when you look at it from the scarlet and gray perspective, it's all between the ears. Where is Ohio State mentally? Does Ryan Day have this team multiple weeks removed from that Michigan game? Are the Michigan Wolverines still living in the head of the Ohio State Buckeyes? Is that loss to Michigan a loss that can possibly beat Ohio State twice? That's, I think, the big thing, because we've seen it all year long. When Ohio State is Ohio State, when the Buckeyes are playing great football, they're a great football team. They're one of the best football teams in America. They are a national championship caliber team, but when they're playing and play calling like they are in that game against the Michigan Wolverines, and, you know, that clear mental block that Ryan Day and this entire program has, that is not a recipe for Ohio State success, certainly right now. We know about the injuries on the Ohio State offensive line. They take on a really good defense right now in the Tennessee Volunteers out of there in the SEC. So when you start to look at Tennessee, of course, coached by Josh Heupel, Nico Iamaleava, he maybe hasn't been the superstar, dark horse Heisman candidate type of guy that we maybe expected earlier in the season. Nico has thrown for over 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But maybe a reason why is because of what they've been able to do out of the backfield with a guy named Dylan Sampson. And that is somebody that Ohio State has to find a way to stop. Tennessee, if you're kind of coming from Big Ten country, which if you're watching this channel, if you're watching this show, of course you are, right? When you think of Tennessee, you might think of that great team a couple of years ago where they threw the ball up and down the field when Hendon Hooker was the quarterback and they had that great offense. I think it's a little bit different for the Volunteers this season. I mentioned Dylan Sampson. He's 8th in the country in rushing yards this season on the ground. So that interior defensive line needs to be able to play well. Tyleik Williams needs to play well. Ty Hamilton certainly needs to be able to play well in the middle of this Ohio State defensive line. That's got to be the main key for Jim Knowles. Hey, if we're able to contain this run game, if we're able to stop this run game, hey, we know Nico can throw the football, and they do have some weapons, certainly down the field as well, but considering of what we've seen from the Tennessee Volunteers this season and what the production that Dylan Sampson has put up this season, Ohio State is feeling a lot better if they can keep Dylan Sampson right around 100 yards or under 100 yards. If they can play that typical type of Ohio State defensive line type of game where they're clogging up the middle. And look, they need to get better production out of JT Tuimoloau. They need to get better production certainly out of Jack Sawyer coming off the edge as well against this Tennessee offensive line. You look to the other side of the ball, Tennessee's got a good defense, folks. They've got a really good defense. Run game and defense. That's the name of the game right now for Josh Heupel. They are 4th in the country in total defense. Of course, James Pierce, 7.5 sacks this season up front on the defensive line. He leads Tennessee there. Jermod McCoy and Will Brooks have combined for 7 interceptions this season as well. So where is Ohio State's offense? The last time we saw the Buckeyes on the football field on offense, they were running the ball up the middle, and they were getting stuffed up the middle. And the play calling didn't exactly exert a lot of confidence in Will Howard, right? So I want to see Ohio State get back to Ohio State. I want to see them be balanced. Let's take advantage of Jeremiah Smith down the field. Let's take advantage of Emeka Egbuka down the field. Let's take advantage of all of those types of weapons that the Ohio State Buckeyes have down the field, right? If they can keep this Tennessee defense off balance, and I don't think they're going to put up a ton of points. Are they going to put up 35 points against Tennessee? I don't think that's going to happen.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.